Good evening. It's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll start with an invocation led by Councilmember Singh, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Roberto. Please rise as you're able.
Let us take a moment to reflect on the weight of our decisions tonight and on who is affected most by them. It is usually the least of us and the voices that we don't necessarily hear from because they're rarely in this room. Ahista se shanti me, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, if you could call roll, please.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Here.
Councilwoman Helsley.
Here.
Councilwoman McKenzie.
Here.
Councilwoman Parker.
Here.
Councilwoman Ryder.
Here.
Councilman Roberto.
Here.
Councilwoman Singh. Vice Mayor Smith.
Here.
And Councilman Thomas.
Here.
All members present, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Next item is approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Are there any items, item 5A, are there any items to be withdrawn tonight? Vice Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Speaking with the applicant of 10A, would like to withdraw the appeal. So I'll make a motion to do that.
Okay, motion's been made to withdraw item 10A. It's been made and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Any other items to be withdrawn? Vice Mayor? No? Nope. Anyone? Okay. Are there any items to be postponed? Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, Mayor, in regard to 12B, C, and D, that's a proposal to rezone an area up on Pratt Road. This is not an unusual situation where we just need a little bit more time for the neighbors and the applicant to do some more discussion. To the applicant's credit, he hosted the neighbors at a meeting last Saturday, really had a good discussion, made some progress. That would be Mr. Edward Smith. Appreciate what you did there, sir. Gentleman by the name of Tim Allen helped organize the neighbors, and we just simply need to postpone, I think, for 2 weeks to see if we can resolve some issues and get some more information.
Okay. So the motion has been made to postpone for 2 weeks, items 12B, C, and D. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been seconded. Any questions or discussion? Vice Mayor, any questions or no? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Are there any other items to be postponed? Vice Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. In speaking with the developer and the administration for item 11B, I would request a postponement for 2 weeks to February 20th. The developer is looking at ways to mitigate some of the items included in that in 11B.
Okay. So motion is made to postpone item 11B as in boy. Is there a second? Postpone for 2 weeks.
Correct.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Any other items to be postponed? Are there any items to be requested to be added by motion? Okay, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, time now for my mayor's report. I want to start by talking about several exciting things happening for the young people of our community. First, applications are open for programs serving our most at-risk youth. In previous years, we've held separate grant cycles for spring and summer programs, and this year we are doing one grant cycle that covers all time periods. And awards will range from $5,000 up to $40,000, and funding is prioritized to those organizations reaching those who are at the highest risk of experiencing violence. So to learn more about those grants and to apply, go to knoxvilletn.gov/community safety. Applications are due by February 23rd. And by the way, I want you all to know that since we have started the youth grant program in 2021, we have invested nearly $630,000 in youth engagement programs. So thank you for supporting those. Another item that's happening for our young people is this Saturday, Empower Knox Youth Summit is going to be happening, and all teenagers in Knoxville who want to plug into local issues and to city government are invited to attend. It's this Saturday, February 10th, at the Change Center. The event is expected to go until 6, and followed by pizza and skating. So there'll be an opportunity to hear from various speakers and have conversations and ask questions, and then pizza and skating. So sounds like a pretty fun day. I'll be there, and city council members are invited to participate. And the event is free. So please register at knoxvilletn.gov/empowerknox. And I invite you also to please share this information with any teenagers or parents of teenagers who you think might be interested. And now switching over to an important topic of conversation that the council's been working on in many ways for years is housing. I know we're going to have a robust discussion about housing through this agenda and again at the workshop next week, but I wanted to share some other news from our housing and neighborhood development team. We just recently wrapped up nearly a decade of work aimed at making homes safer, thanks in part to a HUD grant. The city, along with the CAC, identified and removed lead-based paint hazards for low and moderate income homeowners, rental property owners, and tenants. We managed $6 million in repairs to over 325 households over the last 10 years. This work means a healthier and more sustainable living environment for our city residents who are most in need. So thanks to CAC and everyone else who helped make these repairs possible. And also now I want to remind everybody about our rules of decorum. Those who wish to speak either to a specific agenda item or during public forum should sign up with Mr. Johnson, the city recorder, ahead of time. Please do not use profanity, and when speaking to specific agenda items, please remember to stay on topic. Those who fail to adhere to these rules may be ruled out of order and asked to step away from the podium. For those who are listening, please note, you may not disrupt a public meeting from the audience. Those who do may be asked to leave. Thank you in advance for cooperating with these rules. And that concludes my mayor's report. Are there any reports from council members or committees? Vice Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to add to your comment around the workshop. Council will hold a workshop on February 15th, next Thursday, in this room at 5 p.m. to discuss the city's housing strategies, and the public is welcome to attend.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Roberto.
Thank you, Mayor. With the pending second reading vote on missing middle this evening, I've had the opportunity to have many discussions with our second district neighborhoods and neighbors. And in those discussions, there was a lot of input and questions about the ADU amendment that is going to come to council at our next meeting. So to address that, I'm going to schedule, or I have scheduled, a second district neighborhood-wide discussion focused on ADUs on Tuesday, February 13th from 5:30 to 7 at Bearden United Methodist Church, located at 4407 Sutherland Avenue. And I hope all of our second district neighbors and neighborhood associations will come and join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Roberto. Any other reports from council? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to, let's see, items on the second reading. And we've got a little technical difficulty with the agenda being displayed up on the screen. If you have a smartphone, you can follow along on your phones. We'll try to fix it in the meantime.
9A is an ordinance to amend the Knoxville City Code Appendix B, Article 7.0.2.A, Summary of Review Authority, Article 7.0.2.G.1, Alternative Compliance Review, Article 7.0.2, Common Approval Procedures, and to correct references to the Metropolitan Planning Commission by changing to Knoxville, Knox County Planning in several sections, City of Knoxville applicant, all districts.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9B is an ordinance to amend the Knoxville City Code Appendix B zoning code, moving Article 4.6 General Standards of Applicability to 4.7, inserting a new Article 4.6 Middle Housing Standards with subsections 4.6.A Middle Housing Types, 4.6.B Middle Housing Uses, 4.6.C Middle Housing Dimensional Standards, 4.6.D Middle Housing Parking Standards, 4.6.E Middle Housing Design Standards, 4.6.F Middle Housing Conversion Standards, and 4.6.G Middle Housing Administrative Variations, and making minor revisions to Article 2.3 Definitions, Article 4.2 Uses, Article 4.3 Dimensional Standards, Article 4.6 General Standards of Applicability, City of Knoxville applicant, all districts.
Motion's been made to approve and seconded. Council members, we have some people signed up to speak to this item. First, one person signed up to speak in opposition. We start with the opposition.
In favor.
Okay. We have 3 people signed up to speak in favor, and then 1 person is signed up to speak in opposition. So we'll start with those in favor. First up is Dustin Durham. Mr. Durham. If you could start by stating your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 5 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Dustin Durham, my address is 1422 Cornelia Street, apartment 2, 37917. Council members, first, I want to thank you from my core for your unanimous vote on this plan 2 weeks ago. What a strong show of support for moving our neighborhoods into the modern era and creating a Knoxville that is freer, fairer, and more prosperous. And with one more yes vote, today has the potential to be a watershed day. Today can be the day that we officially begin conquering our housing crisis. I won't belabor you with all the facts of this plan, as we all know them well at this point. We know a new home doesn't have to be affordable for it to help with the overall crisis, because in a simple supply and demand economy, the more we build, the lower and slower rents and home prices grow. We know that homes come in all shapes and sizes, and you can build wealth with a fourplex just as much as a detached house. We know these things. Instead, I want to focus on the hope that this plan brings many like myself, those who rent and who have called Knoxville home for many years. Many of the folks that would most benefit from this plan are those of us under 45 who are just starting our families and building our careers. Those of us who prefer options for homes in a diverse, dense, and walkable neighborhood. We support this plan. I am the executive director of a new nonprofit, Yes Knoxville, and in the past months, we have both done physical and digital petitions for this plan. Currently, we have over 120 signatures by locals, many of which reside in the TDR areas. These people, like me, are hopeful because of this plan. My story is an example why. 2 years ago, I was living in 4th and Gill in a beautiful historic duplex. I loved it, and I loved my neighbors. I'd planned to stay there until I was able to buy a home, probably around the year 2060, but I had a terrible landlord who cared zero for his buildings and even less for his tenants. Coming back from seeing my family at Christmas, I discovered that a pipe to the apartment above mine, which was unoccupied, had burst. My kitchen ceiling and one of my walls had collapsed. After emailing my landlord, reminding him of my rights as a renter under Tennessee state law, as well as his responsibilities, instead of apologizing for the chaos, he instead told me that he had decided not to renew my monthly lease. Due to a random connection and divine timing, I found an apartment in Old North Knoxville that, while it was more than I had been paying, was still affordable for me. Otherwise, I might now be sleeping on a friend's couch or on the streets. This stressful, degrading insanity that I went through is directly caused by decades of anti-multifamily home biases and fears of neighborhood change. But we cannot build a city based on bias and fear. We have to build it based on hope. I love this city. I plan to be here until I die at the young age of 110. I am a KTA commissioner, a local muralist, and I am involved in the Old North Knoxville Board. Like 51% of this city, I am a renter, and like most in that number, I do want to own my own home one day. Like 40% of this city, I am single, and I do not need or necessarily want to build wealth through a large detached house. I want options. I want choices to build wealth in a small attached unit in a neighborhood I love. This plan is quite literally the least we can do. This plan is absolutely needed. I want to be able to sleep easy at night, knowing that should another pipe burst and a landlord treat me that badly, our codes are not preventing new units that match my needs and preferences from being built. I don't want to rely on a miracle from God to find a place to live. I should be able to do that on my own. And I cannot do that until we officially change our codes and make today the beginning of the end of this housing crisis. Vote yes again. Pass this plan and give us hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person signed up to speak is Aaron Jernigan. Mr. Jernigan, if you come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Aaron Jernigan, and I reside at 529 Atlantic Avenue, which is in the TDR. I moved to Knoxville 6 years ago to study architecture and have called it home since. I lived in Lincoln Park for 5 of those years. The draw for me and my wife, who is a teacher at Christenberry, was the sense of community and connection in the older neighborhoods, the welcoming culture, the artsiness, the low cost of living, and the many opportunities that this place offered our family. Some things have changed since then, some for the better, some for the worse. Change always happens, and if you try to avoid change, change will still come. But the important thing is to decide what is worth preserving. And I believe Knoxville's welcoming culture and close-knit neighborhoods are worth preserving. I'd like to give you 3 ways that supporting the missing middle housing proposal will help preserve and sustain what is wonderful about Knoxville. The first, this proposal will expand the types of homes available for rent and purchase. Diverse housing serves a diverse population. Is a single-family home really suitable for everyone? What if someone doesn't want and or can't afford that much house or that much property? Should we shut them out entirely? What if someone would like to live in the same building with other people? Perhaps they need help occasionally, or they feel more secure that way. What if someone doesn't want all the maintenance associated with a single-family home on a large lot, but they also don't want to live in a large apartment complex? As we know, it's currently functionally illegal to build new houses for people with these preferences or constraints. And tonight, there's an opportunity to change that. Secondly, this proposal will help stabilize Knoxville's housing market. New houses are never cheap, and I know this as an architectural designer. Neither are new cars, but used cars can't exist without new cars having been made. And likewise, unsubsidized affordable housing can't exist without new housing having been built. Aside from that, every new house that attracts a wealthy buyer kept that buyer from outcompeting others for an older house and subsequently driving up its price and skewing the market. Finally, this proposal will help expand our tax base. The missing middle proposal, or the middle housing proposed, is the gentlest form of slightly increasing density that I could possibly imagine. We know that a healthy tax base over less land means more money for sidewalks, bike lanes, greenways, parks, bus service, and recycling pickup. Let's treat our city like a city and re-legalize these types of homes to grow our tax base and support our city services. I appreciate all who have engaged with this proposal. Tonight's an opportunity to make Knoxville a more connected, free, and equitable city, and to preserve what is most important about our neighborhoods, the culture of openness and the connection that they breed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jernigan. Next person signed up to speak in favor of this item is Don Lindsay. Mr. Lindsay, if you could come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Don Lindsay. I reside at 5312 Trace Manor Lane in Knoxville, 37912. Thank you all for the work that you're doing to hopefully take the missing out of Missing Middle. I would love to see that happen tonight and would hope that that would continue. And thank you as well for the city of Knoxville being a part of AARP's Age-Friendly Community Network. That's an effort of AARP that will, across the country, reward and encourage communities and localities across the country to take steps to make sure that people of all ages live well and have the good things they need in their communities. The Missing Middle genre of housing will give people choices that they need. We talked about choices earlier here, and what it does is allow people, for instance, who are house rich and cash poor, to be able to come to an area and buy into a place that is the right size for them. It's often called downsizing, but really it is something that allows them to be in the right size of the house that they need. It also encourages the kind of neighborhood where they are close to housing. I mean, they're close to stores, employment, they're close to schools, recreation, open spaces, and walkability. And all of this is desired by a large number. AARP did a survey not too long ago and determined that there were many, many people who really preferred that kind of a neighborhood. Missing middle or the middle kind of housing are the kinds of housing that encourage this kind of neighborhood. It will help reduce the isolation. Remembering COVID, how important we found that isolation could be to creating a bad situation for people. And this would help discourage isolation by allowing more interaction between people in the neighborhood. And one other thing too, as we age, we are going to be in more and more need for caregivers. And unpaid family caregivers are the backbone of long-term care in this country. And with Missing Middle, or with the middle housing type of housing, that allows more people to be near their loved ones, but still have some space of their own. It helps to prevent the kind of thing that happens when people have to spend down all their assets just to get into Medicaid. But with middle housing, it allows people to be a part of their family and be close to them, if not right within the building. Middle housing does a lot of great things for this community, and I encourage you to continue to vote for this and be happy to answer any questions if needed.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you.
Now we have one person signed up to speak in opposition to item 9B, Deborah Thomas. Ms. Thomas? Is she? There you are. Please come to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to address council.
I'd like to ask for a minute or two more since I'm the only one on the other side.
I'm sorry, you'll have up to 5 minutes. That's council rules.
Yeah, they seem to change a lot. Deborah Thomas, Oakwood resident times decades. I don't expect to change anyone's mind tonight, but I have a lot more to say about this plan as proposed and what is happening in lower income neighborhoods. I'm not against Missing Middle. I'm against the way this plan has been brought forward. Who are we? Teachers, librarians, custodians, retail and restaurant workers, nurses, government workers, retirees on fixed Social Security incomes. This targeted area is primarily low income. Many of these neighborhoods are occupied predominantly by people of color. These areas include Lonsdale, Mechanicsville, and East Knoxville, which will have gentrification with the new stadium. They were either redlined or listed as in decline by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, Hulk maps, in the 1930s. A few of the areas have protections like 4th and Gill, the mayor's neighborhood, and Old North, Member Ryder's neighborhood, which have historic and demolition protection as well as stable high property prices. Others, like Oakwood, are experiencing extreme gentrification and continued illegal demolition and unpermitted construction. Public comments regarding administrative concerns were not addressed at planning after the first meeting, then the parking requirements were decreased at the second meeting. Administrative concerns were not addressed by council with the exception of one about matching the block. There is no open and accountable appeals process. The plan has not been open and inclusive as it was during RECODE. Was there a committee of stakeholders from the impacted areas? Nor has there been adequate media coverage presenting both sides. There were 7 or 8 speakers opposed that spoke at the October meeting, but Wait TV only showed an interview of a proponent in Old North Knoxville. There were no cameras at the meetings. The poll showing support was done by the Realtors Association. I watched the council workshop and got concerned. I attended the meeting at John T. O'Connor Center and wanted more information. The map was small, a regular sheet of paper. Planning staff can do better than that for a presentation that will affect 15,000 households. At the October meeting, I discovered there was essentially a zoning change to RN4. I spoke neutrally but expressed concerns about demolitions. At the December meeting, none of the concerns have been addressed. Parking requirements were eliminated by a last-minute rush of emails from realtors and investors. There already isn't enough parking in Oakwood. People park in their yards. We also have issues with people not getting their mail because they must use street parking, and if the mailbox is on the street, the post office won't deliver if it's blocked. So here's the scenario for you. One of the few unattached lots is at Burwell and Harvey. If someone builds a fourplex there with no required parking because it's on the bus line, where will people park? It's a corner lot with no street parking on that side. The neighbors across the street park on their side. There's maybe one spot in front because it's the intersection. At council 2 weeks ago, I expressed concerns over ongoing illegal demolitions, non-permitted construction, parking issues, gentrification, and lack of regulation at Airbnb. There are only 5 empty lots not attached to a homeowner nearby in the Oakwood study area. There are about 700 residences. I sent you photos of demolished mobile home park and the townhouses that have already been approved that don't blend in with the neighborhood. You also saw other demolition pictures in my email, and nobody mentioned those except to say it wouldn't be a problem. There are differences in these neighborhoods. A few are more stable and have protections. Most don't. As a city, we will have a loss of workforce housing. Once it's gone, you can't bring it back because new construction is so expensive. You don't even have an assessment of the available workforce housing. You could postpone a couple of months and do a reassessment of Oakwood to see what has been lost in the last 5 years. It's a microcosm of your workforce neighborhoods. You say permitting and codes will catch these things. They are already not working. My new neighbor from Chicago says the $300,000 fixer-uppers. There was no permitted work done on his flipped house. He's doing most of the upgrades himself because he's a carpenter. Even infill design is approving things that don't match with the neighborhood, like the new townhouses on Oldham Avenue. As you need to understand, there are differences in codes enforcement for neighbors in Oakwood or Lonsdale. If we call codes, it gets neighbors evicted and houses demolished. So calling codes doesn't happen often. Only when there are abandoned houses with squatters that are robbing or threatening neighbors. 4th and Gill neighbors call all the time to protect their property values, but nothing gets demolished. So I guess the next phase, after you unleash the zoning floodgates on low-income residents, will be the flippers coming in and driving out long-term residents with codes violations they can't afford to fix. This has already happened in Pittsburgh. Keep this small. Start with existing empty lots. I have asked this at all the meetings. That's 2,000 properties versus 15,000 primarily low-income households. Have an expiration date and reevaluate. Focus on the empty corridors. United Way owns the old Kmart at Northgate and has for decades. Start there. Fix the parking requirements to 1 spot per unit. Alert neighbors they don't have to put mailboxes on the street. In closing, I'm not opposed to mixed zoning. We already have over 20 duplexes, ADUs, even triplexes and small apartments. The conversion does not help low-income neighbors. If we cannot afford to update our bathroom to age in place, then do you think the neighbors are going to take out a construction loan to make their home a duplex? But I'm very opposed to this plan. There's no guarantee of affordability and a high risk for losing what remains of affordable housing. A housing advocate from Nashville said the best thing you can do is keep people where they are. If you want to pass this, make the initial plan for existing empty lots and reevaluate it 6 months and 1 year.
Ms. Thomas, your time is up. Thank you very much. Council members, that concludes the people who've signed up to speak on this item. I just want to say, I want to thank council members for all your consideration over the many, actually, over 2 years that we've been working on this and getting input from both Opticos and neighborhood groups. I want to thank Cheryl Ball, Brian Berry, Amy Brooks, and Lindsay Crockett for all your work preparing this, refining it, and having dozens of community meetings, both, over the many recent, months, and also in just more recent months, in working with the Planning Commission and listening and responding to the needs of the community. I appreciate all the neighbors who participated, and like listened and learned and were open to understanding what maybe seemed like a big change, but understanding helps people deal with change, and I appreciate people taking the time out of their busy lives to learn about it. I want to thank the UT architecture students who did some work to prepare models of what middle housing can look like and how middle housing very much looks like housing that's already in these neighborhoods. And it's will be not only adding to our housing supply, but adding to the beauty and livability of the neighborhoods that we hope to see these new types of housing added. Also, just many other groups have been involved in this, Bike Walk Knox, Yes Knoxville, and many other entities. So just wanted to thank everybody for their input and attention to this. It is a change, but I'm confident that it's going to be a positive one for our city, for people of all ages looking for a diversity of housing options based on their needs and their budgets. And I think this is a positive step in the right direction. Councilmember Parker and then Ryder.
Thank you, Mayor. I was not able to participate in the first discussion on this as I was still snowed in, so I'm glad to be able to participate in discussion tonight. I've expressed my concerns as we've been going through this process, concerns and frustrations. One being that we've just gone through recode, right? 4 years ago, we've just gone through a major rezoning process, and that set expectations in our community. When we've gone through such a massive process, there's not an expectation that another process will follow. But if it is to follow, that at least a similar amount of notice will be given as the first process. We have not given that type of notice or engagement around these changes. For the recode process, all impacted property owners received a letter in the mail to let them know about the process. We haven't done that with this process. We haven't notified folks in the neighborhoods. When these conversations, I remember when I began running for office in 2017, at that time, the conversations taking place in our neighborhoods were, we need to preserve our barber homes and our historic homes and convert them back to single-family homes. This was just 6 years ago. So that overlaps with some folks who are on this council. That's part of the frustration. The other part is that when we began the conversation, we began it as an affordable housing conversation. We have an affordable housing crisis, and we got to do something about it. We went 2 years and finally are at a point where folks are willing to admit, okay, well, this won't produce affordable housing, but maybe at some point in our lifetime, this additional supply will help bring down prices. Then we moved into a conversation of missing middle. Well, what is missing middle? Well, we have these folks who, they don't qualify for the subsidies or the vouchers. Their income's too high for that, but too low for market rate. Okay. But now we want to build market rate missing middle housing and say that that's for the missing middle. Y'all do realize missing middle is about income. It's not about the size of the unit. It's about providing housing for folks who are falling through the gaps. But now we're learning that's not going to happen because we're going to have policies in place that discourage conversion. And so we're looking at new construction. We're acknowledging that new construction is going to be more expensive, likely market rate. So not necessarily going to hit that missing middle. And I'm a proponent of inclusive zoning. But I'm worried that the way that we're going about it is actually going to work against the goals that we have in place. Because we've been talking about affordable housing. And then once people see developments coming into their neighborhood that aren't affordable, that aren't for the middle income folks in their neighborhood, then that's when the resentment comes. And all of these issues that we haven't dealt with. The trash collection that doesn't happen when folks are parked on the streets. The mail delivery. And we're talking about, well, 100 years ago, we had this many people in the neighborhoods. Well, what was the quality of living at that point? We had boarding houses. We had people who didn't have money, to afford regular apartments crammed into these kind of workforce housing. Is that what we want to go back to? So I'm confused about what the goal of this missing middle housing plan actually is.
Thank you. Councilmember Ryder? Yeah, so I'm going to start my question with either Ms. Ball or I know Mr. Hall. So I'll let you decide who should answer my question, but I know I'm going to address some of the conversations about demolition and some of those concerns. There were some calls to some other cities that have already instituted this increased. I want to specify that one of the things that makes this different than RECODE is that with RECODE, we changed people's rights and we changed their zoning entirely, and that's what the letter specified, is that people's actual zoning designation might change because there were properties that went from commercial to office, from residential to commercial, or vice versa. And we wanted those people notified, and that's what the letter was about, and that's what we voted to fund that for. This is an expansion of rights. And Ms. Ball, when you and your staff called and talked to other cities that have expanded the zoning rights of properties to include, for example, Minneapolis went to everything could have a triplex at least. What were their observations about demolition in the places that were called?
Thank you for the question, Councilman Ryder. We called a number of different cities and found that none of them saw an increase in their demolition permits after implementing middle housing standards. There was not an increase in demolition permits.
Did they see a swift increase in permitting for more than single-family housing? Like what was the rate? Like what,
For middle housing,
Yeah.
For middle housing, all of the cities reported very incremental development of middle housing types throughout the neighborhoods, and no one saw a huge rush of middle housing types just coming on board at all. It's very incremental. It's going to vary, of course, based on the size of the city and the geography and all of that, but no one saw a significant increase.
And can you refresh my memory about how we started this process? Because I think to address some of the comments that I've heard here about the Optico study happened.
That's correct. In 2022, Opticos, and I may call on my colleagues with planning as they were instrumental in that particular process. But Opticos worked in 2022 and completed their study in, I believe, September, and provided the report at that time.
And what's the stated mission in, what we were trying to accomplish with the Optico study?
I'm not going to be great
okay.
at quoting the actual study off the top of my head, but I'm confident that I can call on my planning colleagues to assist. The goal was to identify barriers to middle housing types throughout the city, identify appropriate neighborhoods that would help us, that would be appropriate for middle housing types, and to help us identify what some specific zoning code changes might be that we could make to help facilitate middle housing in Knoxville. Did you all have anything to add to that? Okay.
But what's the goal? Like, what is middle housing and why do we want more of it? Like, what was the goal stated in the Optico study? I'm pulling it up myself.
I mean, I can't quote the study, I don't have it in front of me, but I mean, the goal was, just as Ms. Ball just described, like, we wanted to be able to restore the type of housing that has been successful within the TDR in the past and make it legal to create that kind of housing again. And that's the goal, because it makes more walkable, sustainable, equitable communities. It helps address our shortage of housing, and it helps us grow as a city in a sustainable way without having to, expand our boundaries. So middle housing is a type of housing that's been in Knoxville for a long time. It's now very, very difficult to build it, even in places that have had it since, for 100 years. And so this was a recommendation for how to restore it in places that had have been using this kind of housing in the past. Ms. Brooks, did you have anything to add? I mean, we could read the
I'm
thing if you
looking
want. I mean,
at some of it as you're going through it. My time is up, so I'll let somebody else ask a question.
okay. Before we move to Councilmember Roberto, Director Brooks, if you could look at the mission, if there's anything that you think hasn't been captured by the discussion that you want to add, let us know. I mean, I don't know if it's like 2 paragraphs or 2 sentences. Can you advise us?
I believe that it's been captured, but I'll take a closer look.
Okay, if there's anything to add, let us know. Councilmember Roberto and then Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. In the conversations I've had, one thing has been, brought to my attention many times is some level of clarity or confusion about what's going on here. And so I was very glad to have some very wide-ranging and, rather robust discussions with residents and neighbors. And one of the things that I think might need clarity is looking at page 74 in our packet, specifically the language in section 4.6. That language in that second sentence reads, middle housing types are permitted in RN1, RN2, RN3, and RN4 zoning districts located in the land use designated traditional neighborhood residential, or TDR. And my question was for Director Swanson, if council was to add some additional language here to make it very clear where this is, for instance, if we added the words "and shall be," so that sentence would now be, middle housing types are permitted in RN1, RN2, RN3, and RN4 zoning districts, and shall be located in the land use areas designated traditional neighborhood residential, TDR. Would that be a substantive amendment?
No, that would be a clarification, because it doesn't change anything, doesn't make anything different. It just simply almost is a redundancy, but does in fact clarify.
And I think that's important here. So what I was, in the discussions I had with neighbors, they really wanted to see that kind of clarity. So I'd like to make a motion since this is not a substantive motion, and it would be a friendly motion, to add 3 words to that second sentence in the first paragraph in section 4.6, so that it would read, middle housing types are permitted in RN1, RN2, RN3, and RN4 zoning districts, and shall be located in the land use areas designated traditional neighborhood residential, TDR, to add that clarification.
I'll second.
I was second as well.
Okay, motion has been made to amend it as Councilmember Roberto just stated. Does anybody have any questions about the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to amend carries. Councilmember Roberto, are you done? If you're,
Yeah, I'll let,
okay, Councilmember Thomas. Turn your microphone on.
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, got a lot of input on this. I've talked to many, many folks and read lots of material. I'm going to vote for this, but it is not without serious reservations. And the points that Councilmember Parker made and the person from Oakwood Lincoln Park, Ms. Thomas made, they're very well taken by me, and they made some good points, and those are my concerns. I'm not sure exactly what the implementation of this is going to mean. That's honest. I hope that it does what we want it to. But for the administration's assurance that this is going to be carefully tracked, and we are going to have frequent updates so that we can actually see in reality how this is happening. But not for those assurances, I would not support it. But I am going to go ahead and vote for it, hope for the best. I hope it's a good idea, but the concerns that were expressed here tonight, which I won't repeat because they were very well expressed, do register with me. So having said that, I will be voting for it, but is without reservations, and I will be scrutinizing this as it is implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Ryder?
Sorry. So some of the concerns that have been brought up tonight are about affordability. And so since I asked my last question, I looked at the Optico study, and you guys did give me some of the answers, but it explicitly starts with the need for more housing choices. Increasingly, millennials and baby boomers are looking for more choices and smaller places to live that are within walking distance of their lifestyle. I have many neighbors like that. They can't age in place, and they have to leave because all we have are single-family houses that don't meet their needs. And they have no choice but to leave because they don't want a 3,000 square foot house or even an 1,800 square foot house. I visited a project down in Atlanta that AARP was actually there and partnering with them, where they built small 1-bedroom, 1-bath houses. They were not tiny homes, but that met people's needs and that were affordable, and the prices ranged to build them. And they were built during 2021 through 2022. They ranged 70-some thousand to 80-some thousand. And they met people's needs, and they were walking distance from the town square on an empty lot there, and provided housing in a walkable area for people that wanted a small space. Dustin, I'm sorry, I'm going to call you by first name and ask you to come up. You shared some stats with me, because one of the questions, the basics of economics, and I'll tell you guys, I think I took an economics class and I don't think I made an A, but I get the basics. The basics are supply and demand, supply and demand, supply and demand. So could you tell me what you shared with me, this Pew study that talks about the supply and the rent changes in Minneapolis and other cities? And if anybody wants the authoritative link, it's not just Mr. Durham.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not an authority like Pew is. So if you all know Pew Research and Pew Charitable Trust. So basically, what I was sharing, and I'm sure the planning staff can definitely speak to this too. But Minneapolis is a really, really good showcase for something like this. So back in, I believe it was 2017 or so, they essentially they did a lot more than what we're trying to do here, right? So what they did is they legalized triplexes citywide. Okay. But what they did and what this study shows is it shows Minneapolis along with about 4 other cities, including Tysons Corner, Virginia, Portland, Oregon, and New Rochelle, New York. And essentially what you see is in cities where we have changed the zoning to allow the missing middle typology of houses, is that because we're providing more homes for people, more total units, we're matching the demand that people have for housing. And so, for example, in Minneapolis, since 2017, rents have increased, but they've increased 1%. If you look at the state of Minnesota as a whole, it's at 8%. If you look at the U.S. as a whole, it's 31%. So the reality is, and listen, I'm not the biggest fan of the free market, but the reality is it's what we have. And we know we have this, tens of thousands of people who want to move here. And I welcome them. Knoxville's a great place. We cannot provide the units we need in the time we need by just providing single-family homes. And we have the data. Again, Pew has the data. Many people have this data showing us that it is simple supply and demand. If we build the units, we can catch up quicker to the deficit, and rents might increase because everything's going to increase, but it increases at a rate to which folks like me who make $30,000 a year can afford, and we're not going to wind up homeless. So that's what this shows. And again, if any of you all want this, I can email you the link, and planning can obviously speak to more, but that's what Lauren is referring to.
So in the last thank you so much. In the last meeting, we talked about tracking. Ms. Ball, can you refresh our memory about how we plan on looking at that? I believe we talked about Ms. Crockett being a part of monitoring any demolition requests. Are there anything else we can do to monitor permitting?
Oh, yes, we will be monitoring this in a broad cross-section of ways and have met about that topic really for several months now. It's not new to us that we want to data track. We'll be tracking things like the type of housing, which type of middle housing, how many units did it have, what were the square footage of the units, what was the time between when they applied for a building permit and they got a certificate of occupancy. Of course, we'll be tracking, as you mentioned, demolitions on the property. We have a whole list of things.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Fugit.
Thank you, Mayor. I will say I have struggled with this and still am struggling with this because I do believe we need all types of housing in the city. So I also hope we don't vilify RN1 single-family housing, because a lot of people want that. A lot of people without a lot of money want a single-family home on a lot in a subdivision or in a downtown neighborhood even. And my concern with this is that duplexes have been allowed in RN1 with a use on review, and now it's by right. And so it changes for people who invested in an RN1 neighborhood, the fact that that zoning doesn't really exist anymore in the TDR. So that's my one side. I should have been a lawyer. I can argue both sides. So I see that, and that does cause me concern. But I also know that young professionals who remain single or have children, or one day I will probably be wanting to downsize too, and probably don't want a huge house, which I don't have anyway, but I do have a huge yard. And so I do think, for me, missing middle is providing a type of housing and an opportunity for home ownership and wealth creation with people who may not have had the opportunity to have wealth creation and pass on generational wealth without a type of housing like missing middle. And the way that can happen is, you buy it and the financial institution will look, if it's a duplex, at the rent you get. And that can help people qualify. So I think this idea that only wealthy people will come in and buy these may not be factually correct. So I guess what I'm kind of like my colleague, Councilman Thomas, I'm going to go out on a leap of faith. I have talked into yes and no every day this week. Yes, I'm going to be for it. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. And here today, I think it is a risk worth taking as long as we watch it every 6 months, not every year. I am also not swayed by the Minneapolis data. They've been doing it 7 years. That doesn't tell you long-term ramifications. So I also don't want to sit here and act like the answers we are getting are for sure. And Knoxville's different than Minneapolis. So this is one of the harder votes I have ever taken on council. But I'll support it. But I had said all along I would support it as long as it did not include RN1 neighborhoods. And that's been the thing that's been the hardest for me. Because people who bought into an RN1 neighborhood thinking they were going to have a single-family neighborhood, and that if somebody wanted to build a duplex in their neighborhood, they would know about it and it would have to be approved. Now your house can be, the next door neighbor can split in two and all that kind of stuff, and it just changes what people thought they purchased. And that bothers me. That doesn't necessarily mean that people want that it's a bad thing, but I do feel some compassion and angst for people that are going to find out that this happened when their next door neighbor starts making their house a duplex. And so that's why I want us to be watching this like a hawk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fugit. Vice Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what's been said. I share sentiments with, I think, everybody that's spoken. I'm really glad that we're going to have the workshop next week to discuss all the housing strategies, because I believe the 9 of us are very familiar with all the strategies that the city is deploying, but I don't think the public has seen all of them and kind of put together in a package, because none of them are going to solve the housing crisis alone, but they each play their role. And this one is no different than the rest of them, but they all work together. I have similar concerns related to demolition and change of character, and similar to Councilman Fugit and Councilman Thomas, I am swayed by the mitigation tools in place and the reporting. Both of those two together, I think, have to be there in order for at least me to feel comfortable that we can monitor this without anything getting out of control. The last thing I would ask is, since we saw housing prices spike 2 or 3 years ago, there's been a lot of development that's happened in Knoxville, and so I was going to ask Mr. Sale, I saw you in the audience, if you could come up. This strategy is not for fun, and so it is for housing, for people to age in place. It's for people to become homeowners. It's for people to rent, all in the place in neighborhoods that anybody else enjoys. So since there's been significant housing shortage and prices, there's been a lot of development in the city. Can you talk about any indications we have around rent growth or reduction over the past couple of years?
This is on.
Yep, now it's on.
Hanson, Sale 37917. Yeah, so in the immediate wake of the pandemic, so pre-pandemic, our rental occupancy rate was around 96%, which is a little higher than you want. You want 94. It surged to 99 in 2022, and directly as a result of that, rent growth exceeded 20% in 2022. However, in part from Recode and a number of other things, we saw a record number of rental units that are under construction and a record amount of supply that's hit the market, 4 times the amount of supply we've ever seen in one given year in the last year. And as a result, rent growth has fallen from 20% to 3% and is probably going to continue to decelerate as we move into 2024. So I think the data that was cited earlier about the other cities is great, but the supply injection slowing down rent growth we have the data because it's happening in Knoxville right now.
Just to repeat, there's a lot of macro level forces that move housing markets, and different cities are different for different reasons. But you just said that housing in 2023, the development had increased 4x, but the rent had gone down from 20% increase the year before to 3% increase.
Over the last 2 years, at any given time, we've added 4 times the amount of supply on average over the last year and a half than we had in the previous decade.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think Councilmember Parker's next, and then back to Roberto and Ryder.
A few responses to what we just heard. I continue to feel like this is an inadequate process, and even the information that's being shared with us is inadequate. We know that we have conditions that we have to deal with here in the state of Tennessee that other states don't have to deal with. It would be great if we could put a rent cap on, or if we could pass an ordinance that only allowed rent growth at a certain rate, but we can't do that. I don't know what Minneapolis has done. So I can't just look at that as an example that one, I'm good at economics, but I'm also good at science, right? And when you are testing out a problem, you can't just look at one factor. You gotta look at all of the different factors involved, unless you have like a controlled experiment going on, right? So for me, there just hasn't been enough discussion. When we had and I know it's gonna pass. I see the smiles. I'm just taking my time. When we had the public meetings or public events for people to come and learn about this, there was no presentation. There was no information shared. The level of understanding that you have to have in order to go into a room like that and ask questions to begin to understand what's going on, that's not an accessible, inclusive event for the community where we're really hoping for them to be brought to an understanding on what we're doing. Many of the things and the concerns that have been brought up are around codes enforcement. Yes, I hear that we're going to hire additional codes staff, but we need them for work that's going on right now, not for additional new areas of growth. We need them to cover work that's not happening right now. So when we have concerns in neighborhoods about, certain developments, I'm not convinced that we are either committed or even have the capacity to respond to those concerns. And that's where we really should be focusing our attention. When I've spoken with some of the supporters of this, they like to point to the bus routes that go through the TDR. But what I like to remind folks of, because I've lived in walkable cities, DC, the Netherlands, Italy, all over the world. You have to be able to take that transportation somewhere, right? We just went through CAT Reimagined and talk about, do we want to increase ridership or do we want to increase coverage? Well, we largely went with ridership. The folks who wanted coverage, the folks who said, I need to get to Turkey Creek, I need to get to the mall, the change in the stop at the mall, I need to get to my work over here. Those weren't the voices that were prioritized. So we have to put a better public infrastructure in place. We can't compare ourselves to cities where you can actually take the public transportation somewhere and come back on it. You can actually use it. You can actually park your car for a week and not even look at it, right? We haven't built our infrastructure up in this city in that way, and we have to be realistic about it. I was looking through Chattanooga's form-based code recently. And one thing that, because I'm looking at parking requirements, I'm looking at what Chattanooga's doing. But one thing that struck me about their form-based code, which is similar to this misdemeanor plan, is they actually put in the ordinance a review of the ordinance. Like there's language in the ordinance that says this will come back before City Council for review. That's missing from ours. So there's a lot of reliance on the fact that we're gonna get some sort of review, but it's not in here by ordinance. It feels rushed. It feels like misplaced priorities. And honestly, I'm ready for us to move on so we can actually focus on affordable housing. That's where I'm at.
Thank you. Councilmember Roberto?
Thank you, Mayor. Thinking about clarity and understanding, I wanted to ask Director Brooks a couple of questions. When we look through, and this is easier, I think, for us because, we live with this day in and day out, and I think when you go out into neighborhoods, you start talking to folks, some of these terms don't make sense, like missing middle or, TDR and things like that. So just thinking about clarity and easier understanding going forward. There is a good definition of TDR in that exists and that's used in this amendment. And my question for you is, as we kind of move on from here, and that definition is not in the definitions list in this zoning amendment. My question is, would you be willing to work with Director Swanson on looking at whether or not taking the existing language that defines the TDR and adding that to this at a future date would be a good thing to do? I think that would add a lot of clarity and would help a lot of folks understand better what's going on.
Councilmember, I would be happy to have further conversations about that, just to clarify. So it's not been our practice to incorporate land use classifications into the zoning ordinance. Those are part of our sector plans, and they are part of the one-year plan that's reviewed annually by the Planning Commission as well as this body, but I'd be happy to have further conversation with Director
I just think that would be very helpful. I mean, the definition is very good. It really, kind of discusses the infrastructure that is the focus of this, which I think is also a good development, where it's talking about lots are less than 50 feet wide. They usually have sidewalks and alleys. This area is essentially a 19th and early 20th century grid street neighborhood. And so I think that would be a useful thing to look at and just make sure that's something that we could add for further clarification. On that same point, in March, the planning commissioners are going to take up the one-year plan. And so what I was wondering about there is there's a lot of confusion out in the community about the TDR because the traditional neighborhood residential land use area doesn't even work out to be TDR when you abbreviate it, right? So there's a lot of confusion out there. And after we, presumably will pass this, we're going to be referencing in this amendment the TDR. And I'm just thinking ahead into the future. Somebody who's looking at doing this in the future is going to see, references to the TDR and in the zoning act. They're going to be able to see the map and see where the TDR is. And so my question there is, would it make sense to change the name of the TDR to something that is referencing middle housing? Now, I'm not going to, on the spot, ask you to be creative and figure out what that might be, nor am I going to figure out what it would be. But my question is, it's not something for tonight, but could you consider looking at, when you do the one-year plan amendment and update, could you look at whether or not it makes sense to make a change to that name, considering what we're doing tonight? And then at the same time, if you do decide, hey, it does make sense to make that change for clarity going into the future, which I think it does, then we would need to also update the language in this zoning change so that it would also correspond with that same name, whatever it is that references middle housing. Does that seem fair? It's something you could look at to see if that would be a good thing to do?
I have to admit, that would be quite the undertaking for us to change that land use classification name. There's probably there's some things that we'd need to talk about internally. I agree with you, it doesn't make sense when the name, and I can't tell you where that originated from, but we'd be happy to take a look at it. We have already completed the 2 public input sessions for the one-year plan, but it's definitely something that we can talk about and consider over the next year.
I would appreciate that, because I do think now this is a topic where everyone's talking about it. It's obviously front and center. There's a lot of discussion about what's going on, but many years from now that might not be the case, and we just want to make sure things are very clear for everyone going forward. So I would appreciate it if you'd look into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ryder.
Yeah, I'll just kind of wrap up and say, some of the emails and some of the questions that have been brought up have been about concerns about how people who live within the TDR areas feel about this. And I've had lots of people reach out with support. In fact, today I was in a hurry to get here because we had a 5 o'clock meeting before our 6, and someone from one of my areas called. And I was like, don't really have time to take this call right now, but I've got to. And that's not what they wanted to talk about. They wanted new playground equipment. Those are the kind of calls I'm getting from my constituents. It's not about, I don't want to live next to a duplex. I went and met with the Fairmont-Emerald neighborhood about this, and they were very receptive. And it's striking how many duplexes there are on Fairmont. I didn't notice that actually till quite recently. But I understand that a lot of us want to live in a single-family house. But I will say throughout this process, the more I've learned about the origins of zoning and housing, and there's definitely a lot to be studied and to be learned there about how we ended up going down this pathway. But when people had the choice to build what they wanted on those 50-foot lots in those TDR areas, whether that makes sense or not, the layer was chosen because it's in the map and it exists. And it was a way to define an area. Predominantly, they chose single-family houses. So they built single-family houses in our neighborhoods. Charlie and I both live in them, and that's what they chose. They could have built duplexes, they could have built tris, they could have bought sixplexes, but they didn't. They did some, and they obviously do quite a bit on Fairmont. And often what you would see is somebody would build their own single-family house, and then they would build another single-family house to be a rental, and another single-family house to be a rental or to sell, or they'd move around. And that's how a lot of our neighborhood got built out, was people individually developing it out. But they focused mainly on single-family. This is about creating options. There's a big call for it. The move from single-family or single-person households, we just culturally, that was the point of the information that got shared, is culturally we have changed in the United States, and we're not big, large families with multi-generations living in houses. That's not the norm. And so we just need to reconsider our policy and how we develop housing as we move forward to make it right-sized and appropriate to our cultural norms and those seeking housing in our community. And the last thing I'll say, and not use my whole 5 minutes, it'll be a miracle, is, then I forgot what I was going to say, is that we can say we want to keep studying it, and we can say we don't want to do this, and we can say that we want to only look at some other strategy, but at the same time, people are trying to figure out how to pay $1,500 for a one-bedroom. It's not going to get any better until we implement multiple prongs of multiple approaches to be able to figure out how to get more housing in our community. And the last meeting that we had over dinner was about strategies and ways to prevent and deal with sprawl into the county, which creates a lot of the things people don't like. So we have the ability to increase density in the city. We used to have much greater density until people left and went to the suburbs. And so this is an approach that will address those needs and create more housing at a time that it's needed.
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas and then Parker.
Thank you. Councilperson Ryder, do you think I live in a single-family house?
I have no idea. I just know you live in the TDR.
Okay, I thought you were talking about me. Just for clarification.
You live in the TDR, right?
I do. I live in the TDR. It sounded almost like you and I lived in single-family houses. I don't. It's a duplex. I have an apartment downstairs that I rent, and it's worked for me in lots of ways that people have talked about, and I've rented it to people I've known for years and didn't know at below market value. So anyway, that's just a little bit of information about my personal thing. I haven't lived in a single-family residence since it's the house I grew up. But this one's close. It's a small apartment. But the main comment I wanted to make, and I wanted to follow up on Councilmember Fugit's concerns about the attitude towards single-family houses. And the people I'm thinking about are people I know, and there's a lot of them, and their dream was to have a single-family residence where they could raise their family in a quiet neighborhood, and they work at manual labor, and they work for hourly wages. And after years and years of that, they have been able to do that. And they have an expectation that the city will protect to a certain degree, to a reasonable degree, the neighborhood that they chose to live in. And those are the people that I'm thinking about. And I know the stuff about the missing middle is very well intended, and I really hope it works. But one thing I must say that's concerned me about the conversations I've had from the people who are in favor of missing middle is they don't seem to acknowledge that group of people out there. And it's almost like there's an attitude about RM1, that's kind of privileged and you got it made and I'm out here struggling. That ain't the case for most people, at least in my neighborhoods. So I'm asking you a little bit more. I don't want to be too strident about this, but I got to be honest, that has been missing from the conversations that I've had with people supportive of missing middle. And, we talk about the fear factor, like that's just something that should be dismissed. If you've worked that hard all your life to raise a family in a relatively quiet neighborhood, you have a right to be very seriously concerned about what you've worked for your whole life changing dramatically. So I just wanted to add that to the mix of our conversation.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. I would just add that this is nothing to vilify single-family detached houses. Those are a perfectly great way to live. That's what a lot of our housing stock is, and this won't change that. What it will, I hope, do is give more people a chance to buy that starter home. It is impossible. It's really, really hard to find a house under $300,000. It's even harder to find one for sale under $200,000. So for working families to be able to afford to buy a home, I think this will give more options for people to buy that home. Like, maybe it was Councilmember Fugit who was saying, you can build equity in a home that you buy that's part of a duplex. I hate to personalize things, but just like you, I live in a stacked duplex. And when we were buying our first and only home that we've ever bought 23 years ago, there was a tenant already in it, and that helped us be able to afford our mortgage payment. And I'm not in that position anymore, but like you, we still maintain the apartment because it's just another way to provide one person with another housing option. So the need has switched in my individual case, but we would not have been able to buy a house as easily without having it be a duplex with that rental income. And so this isn't going to diminish the need for or the protection of existing single-family detached house. It's just going to add more options for particularly, vacant lots within the TDR. And I'm committed to reporting back to this council in 6 months, as you guys have suggested, and every 6 months thereafter as needed. And I'm also, I'm confident that this is going to work as intended, and that in a few years, we're going to be really grateful that we move forward, hopefully tonight. Councilmember Helsley? I'll just go to you since you haven't spoken yet this evening.
I have not. You said in 6 months. I don't remember saying 6 months. I thought we were going to have a tracker on the city website somehow. So
we will be monitoring continuously and sharing back to council, but we can do something more official no later than 6 months. And
Well, if people could see what was going on, it would save city employees from answering the phone all the time.
Yeah, we're working on tracking data and being able to, have dashboards about that. So we will try to do that, but we can provide information in more analog manner even before we have some of those bigger systems set up.
Okay. And then I feel like everybody's picking on, like, all the people that are living in RN1 feel like they're being picked on. Hanson, what's the percentage of the city housing stock that's RN1? Sir? I knew you wanted to come back to that podium.
I think it's 80% of the, I think Ms. Director Brooks might have that number, but it's the vast majority of the city of Knoxville is single family.
Okay, thank you. So nobody's picking on RN1. I mean, I live kind of in a big old house myself that I don't need, so let's get something so I can move. But I don't think anybody's going to do anything with RN1, and most of these neighborhoods, don't they already have forms of this housing in them that's within the TDR? That doesn't make sense, Andrew. I know.
Within the TDR, there's no neighborhood that's predominantly RN1. There's already a mixture of housing, including duplexes.
That's what I'm saying.
But they just wouldn't be allowed to be built today. And this is what this will restore, the right to build a variety of types of housing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Parker.
I wanted to bring up another point that's being lost about housing and how people pick housing. People pick neighborhoods oftentimes because they want to be in certain neighborhoods, right? They want to be around certain things. Perhaps there's something culturally that's pulling them there. But also, when looking at housing, when you are a minority in a city, you have to think about where you're living. And I remember when I was looking for housing, had come back from DC and was moving back to Knoxville, and I went to multiple properties in our city within the last decade and was turned away because they did not want me to live there because of the color of my skin, right? And so when I hear density, 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 I'm thinking, okay, but how do we ensure harmony within these communities? And when we're not being intentional about it, we're not doing anything about it. When we're trying to understand why some people want single family or who want space, who want privacy, maybe it's discriminatory conditions that we're living within in our city that's forcing us to have to find those spaces, right? What can we do in these areas where we already have a mix of communities, but that lack of economic empowerment, that lack of ownership, that lack of, that's what ties you to a community. And what I'm worried about is communities that are already low income becoming more investor-owned and less owned by the people who live there. I have not heard NIMBY arguments this entire time. What I have heard from people is we need affordable housing, and I'm afraid these changes are going to increase the cost of living in my neighborhood. And tonight we said, yeah, it might. It's probably going to do it a little bit. But then it's going to even out eventually. And if I were a renter in this market right now, that would not bring me comfort because we're surviving on a day-to-day. If you're a renter, you don't have money put away for when it's a brighter day 2 years from now. You're wondering what your government officials are doing for you right now to relieve the stress that you're dealing with. And I don't see us committing to doing that. We're redesigning cities, fun stuff. But we're not providing the housing that people actually need. And I truly believe, based on the discussion that took place at our last city council meeting, that this will likely be a nothing burger. I do believe the code is written in a way where we're not going to see conversions. There aren't that many vacant lots. We're not going to see a lot of development. I don't know where these duplexes are that people are going to be buying. That's the argument I'm hearing now. Someone can buy a duplex and then rent out the other side, but those aren't built, right? We're making these zoning changes so new developments take place. So we're expecting the working class to take out these construction loans and build duplex. I'm not a banker, but when I went through the process, it did not seem amenable to that. But of course, I have a lot of college debt. When I talk about reviewing these plans, part of it is reviewing things we've already done. Renovating historic buildings and converting those into senior housing. Those are smaller units that seniors can move into. But what's happening with those now? 6 years later or so after they've been opened, after we've put so much effort into subsidizing and rezoning to get those set up for senior housing. Well, they're not affordable, and so they're not being filled. And so now a new business plan is needed. This is the thinking I want us to do so that we do actually produce housing out of this plan.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. Councilmember Roberto?
Thank you, Mayor. I just really appreciate the discussion I've heard from my colleagues. You know, what we're looking at here is having a diversity of housing, and a diversity of housing includes RN1. It includes all types of housing. And in order to get to a point where we can build in the supply that we need to address our current lopsided demand-supply issue, is in a diversity of housing and more units of housing. We're seeing unprecedented popularity in our city, and along with that has come an influx of people, and we're not going to restore price stability in this market either for owners or renters unless we have more supply. And so we've got to address the supply issue, and I think that's this, while an imperfect vehicle, this proposal is a step in the right direction. It is a way for us to build in more available housing and impact affordability long term, but we've got to build in more in order to have that happen. There was, some discussion tonight about recode, and one of the things that I think is really good about this proposal is that it removes ourselves from the thinking that predominated in recode, which was a one-size-fits-all solution, and instead looks at infrastructure. And that's where we're looking at doing this, with the infrastructure. And I think that's great, and I hope that continues. we need more supply, and we've had many conversations about what's the next step after this, and I think it's mixed use along the corridors. That's where we have more opportunities. We heard folks talking about underutilized or vacant commercial properties along our corridors. We have space there. That's where we can start to build in a lot of supply, and I hope that the next conversation we have is about mixed use along the corridors and engaging as much as we can in increasing supply. Thank you.
Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you, Mayor. And just want to, thank my colleagues. We've had a lot of robust conversation around this item, not only this evening, but at the last meeting. Primarily, what we're experiencing here in Knoxville is just what's called, plain and simple, we're having growing pains in our city because we've had such an influx of growth in such a short amount of time. And change is never easy. It's very uncomfortable. And I do want us to be careful that we don't allow those growing pains and some of the changes to negatively impede those folks who have lived in Knoxville all of their lives, who've invested in properties. We know that rents are outrageous in most parts of our city, pretty much across the city. And those are things, as Councilmember Parker and I think some others have stated, we, this council, have no control over that whatsoever. That is strictly up to the landlord as to what the price point is for the property that they have available on the market. But I do want to say that we all should be watching this very closely, just to make sure that there are no unintended consequences that could negatively impact existing neighborhoods. And so, like any other homeowner, there is a slight concern about the change and what it will actually look like as we move forward. But again, I think that these are some things, this is just one step into addressing those growing pains that we have. I mean, we are on top of affordable housing with the mayor's housing commitment that she's made to affordable housing. And this is just one part of many to come. But again, I will be watching it closely, as I think that we all will, up to and including the mayor's administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas?
Yes. No surprise. I appreciate
Your mic is, you need to turn-
person's, Roberto's comments on the corridors. It's not going to surprise anybody. Yes, we will. Let's see. I know what I was going to say. Yes, I'm going to vote for this. I hope for the best, and I know it's well-intentioned, but I have doubts that it's going to really address affordability and the amount of housing stock we actually need. This may help some, but if you look at the amount of available lots, you can already build duplex in all over my neighborhood. Now you can build triplex and fourplex, but how many units is that going to add? Some. How affordable is that going to be? So I don't want to disparage the efforts that we're making here, because hopefully it is in the right direction. I'm going to vote for it. But to me, the real opportunities, as I've said, and many of us have said, is on the corridors. And the corridors are blighted, and there's all kinds of space on the corridors. It's not easy. There's reasons why that hasn't been developed. I understand that. But if we really want to make significant changes in housing stock, that's where it is. So I look forward to the workshop next week, and I really appreciate all the comments that were made by council and all the input I've gotten and all the people that, had the courage and the passion to come up to that microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Singh.
I want to address unintended consequences. We seem to have a lot of fear around that, but right now what we're experiencing are the unintended consequences of zoning changes we made. I'm going to ask Mr. Sales. Do you know when the zoning changes happened to where we stopped making triplexes, or in the TDR areas where we really started making it single homes?
The 1940s generally are when we started to shift zoning, the style of zoning to more suburban, single-family only. I mean, the traditional mode of development, particularly in the TDR, was not exclusive to single-family.
So what was going on at that time?
The history of zoning is replete with some of the worst instances of racism and discrimination in our country. That's not the only reason. There are non-racist reasons for upholding things that were created for racist reasons. But in the history, I mean, single-family zoning really originated after the Supreme Court struck down not allowing African Americans to live in neighborhoods. After that was deemed unconstitutional, large parts of the United States moved to single-family zoning because that was a big enough home that an African-American family, on average, couldn't afford at the time. So there's a lot of history in that regard, but obviously there's many reasons to retain single-family zoning today, like it's not racist intent, but as I said, non-racist reasons for upholding some things that had a lot of discriminatory undertones.
So there's certain things with racism, with nasty capitalism that are always going to creep in, but it feels like even if we have investors owning these duplexes and quads, it's still housing that's not available right now. I do think we need to pay attention to gentrification and not pricing people out of their neighborhood, and that's something that I think we should work on along with this. But those are my concerns. But every single week we have people here at Public Forum talking about they just want a place to live. And to me, listening to that consequence makes this a very easy yes for me.
Thank you, Councilmember Singh. Vice Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. We've had a robust discussion, and we haven't been at this just for past 2 weeks. Everybody's been paying attention for a better part of 2 years. So if there's any other comments, I'll call the question. I think we're ready to vote.
Is everybody ready to vote? Yes. Okay, let's not worry about the call for the question vote then. We'll just go right to the main vote.
Thank you.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion carries 8-1. Thank you very much, Council. I appreciate all your work and attention to this. We won't regret it. I'd like to call for a 10-minute recess. Let's reconvene at 7:46, please. Okay, we have a quorum, so let's proceed with the meeting. Mr. Johnson.
9C is an ordinance to close Layden Drive between the southwest corner of 318 Layden Drive and Layden Drive's eastern terminus, subject to one condition, and authorizing the mayor to execute quitclaim deeds to the adjacent property owners, Cherokee Country Club applicant, 2nd District.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
9D is an ordinance to close Bonnyman Drive between Fort Promise Drive and Reed Street, subject to one condition, and authorizing the mayor to execute quitclaim deeds to the adjacent property owners, Knoxville Community Development Corporation applicant, 6th District.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
9E is an ordinance to close Reed Street between Bonnyman Drive and West Oldham Avenue, subject to one condition, and authorizing the mayor to execute quitclaim deeds to the adjacent property owners, Knoxville Community Development Corporation applicant, 6th District.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
9F is an ordinance to close an unnamed alley between the southeast corner of parcel 094BB003 and the western terminus of the alley at the southwest corner of parcel 094BB002, and authorizing the mayor to execute quitclaim deeds to the adjacent property owners, George Rowdenbush applicant, 6th District.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
9G is an ordinance approving the request of Erica Alaya Munoz for an amendment to the Northwest City Sector Plan from low-density residential neighborhood commercial to low-density residential, leaving all special purpose land use classifications unchanged for property located at 2812 Merchant Drive, 5th District.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
9H is an ordinance to change the base zoning classification of property located at 2812 Merchant Drive from OP District to AG District, leaving all special purpose and overlay districts unchanged. Erica Alea Munoz, applicant, 5th District.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11A is a resolution to add the honorary name Asylum Avenue District to the unnamed road from Blackstock Avenue to Ramsey Street, 6th District.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Vice Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to amend the name that's in this resolution. The Public Property Naming Committee approved this with a caveat that we would ask E911 about the use of avenue. And the response from them was a request to remove avenue because it can be confusing between honorary names and proper street names when emergency services are required. So the amendment would be to add this honorary name as Asylum District as originally submitted by the applicant.
Okay, the motion has been made to amend this to remove the word avenue and just call it Asylum District. It's been made by Vice Mayor Smith.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay. Councilmember Singh, questions or discussion?
Not on this. Are we going to vote on this first?
First is the amendment to change it from Asylum Avenue District just to Asylum District. Any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to amend it carries. So now the motion is back, the motion as amended is to add the honorary name Asylum District. Councilmember Singh.
Thank you. Ms. West, I would love to.
If you could turn your mic on.
Thank you. I just feel like this is in really bad taste, just in the area that it's in and the homeless camps. And I know that you have something coming up in that area, but that's my immediate feeling when I saw that.
If you could.
Bernadette
just-
West,
thank
got
you.
the 940 Blackstock. I think that the word asylum has changed over the years. And so, I mean, even when you think about it in today's standard, in a certain context, when people are seeking asylum, they're trying to seek a safe place. And that's what it was referred to when that street that is actually in front of the building was originally called Asylum Avenue. And we wanted to change it to the Asylum Avenue District because that's where people went to be safe and be taken care of. And so the context of the name has changed over the years where it's not as favorable or it's thinking of what the context that you're thinking of it, but we want to kind of get it back to the original context of that area. And that's why we wanted to, because it was an address that was very important during the time period when it was first built. And the Asylum Avenue was there even though the asylum was up the street from there where the people were staying for the deaf and blind. And so that's why we wanted to kind of just continue it because that street was, when the Western Avenue got built, that street was done away with. So.
Microphone, please.
You're making Luniverse there?
Well, the whole area is going to be the Honorable Asylum District. And then all the different buildings, there's 3 buildings there, and each one of them is going to have kind of a different character, but it's more of it's kind of continuing on. The Sampson right now is mostly the soccer complex, but we want to continue that into a more kind of an entertainment complex that has not only music, but other things that are activities that can go on there that can go on from day to night. And so we'll have big games you can play, like marble racing and duck pin bowling and volleyball and, bocce ball and all that kind of stuff in that area. So we want to kind of make it another kind of entertainment district.
So I wish you lots of luck, and I plan on being there. but I'm still bothered by the name, just the history that it brings to me.
Right, right.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Singh. Vice Mayor Smith, do you have any questions or comments? Councilmember Singh, any other comments? Okay, see, Councilmember Ryder.
I was just going to ask Councilwoman McKenzie what the conversation was like at Public Property Naming Committee regarding this item.
I'm going to defer to Vice Mayor Smith on that one. But let me just say that I, like Councilwoman Singh, at first glance hearing it, it kind of brings that negative connotation, but thank you for explaining what your, interpretation and what you wanted to symbolize and mean, which is that safe space, that calming space. A lot of times when we think of an asylum, we think of people who mental illness, and back in the day, you were called crazy. But as you indicated, this was a place for the deaf and the blind to be in a safe space and not to be vulnerable and become victimized. And so I think it's going to be exciting and interesting, like most things that you do. It's also good to see Rick Emmett sitting there and having your back on this as well. But I'll defer to Vice Mayor Smith to talk about that conversation.
Yeah, this was before we passed the chair baton, so I chaired this one. If you look in your packet on page 425, Jack Neely's penned a little bit of a history about this, and so he's on the Public Property Naming Committee, was able to have that same conversation we've kind of landed on now, which is the original meaning of the word being safe space. And given the creative nature of what's going to happen there, they wanted to reinforce that original term. And sometimes it's important that we reclaim history of what its original name meant. And as part of that, Mr. Neely was advocating for this and was excited about it, as was the board in unanimous support of this after understanding that. So that's some context for you. Only the best.
That
Only the
wasn't,
best.
that wasn't microphone, so I don't know if it's on the record.
We have it.
Okay.
It's in the minutes.
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, I totally understand why Councilmember Singh would have that.
You need to put your microphone on every time.
I know, every time. You have to remind me.
Okay, that's fine.
I totally understand why Councilmember Singh had that reaction. I didn't have that reaction, but it was only because that I was familiar with the history of it. And just to add on a little bit, like even in James Agee's A Death in the Family, which is set in Fort Sanders, he makes reference to the Asylum Avenue
Yes, he does.
viaduct
Yep.
many times. So
Right.
I didn't have that reaction, but if I hadn't known that context of it, I may very well have. So I'm glad that we've had this discussion to kind of clear that up. So.
Thank
You
you.
got some public awareness to do.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Singh?
If Jack Neely's okay with it, I'm okay with it.
Okay, high praise. We'll have to let him know. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
11C is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute all documents on behalf of the city of Knoxville necessary to acquire property for the Washington Pike roadway project by negotiated purchase or by condemnation if necessary within 56 tracts of real property for a total amount not to exceed $6 million.
Second.
Motion to approve and has been made to approve and seconded. Council members, both the 11C and D are items that will allow us to continue to move forward on the long-awaited Washington Pike project. This project includes installing traffic lane improvements, turn lanes, multi-use pedestrian and bike paths, crossing improvements, and implementing ADA accessibility upgrades. This project is important for many reasons, but chief among them is that a recent study showed an average of 1 crash every 4 days along the project corridor, with 20% of crashes rated as severe. So the recently completed Vision Zero Action Plan also identified Washington Pike as part of the city's high injury network, and this project is an opportunity to provide a complete street that aligns with the city's Vision Zero initiative of eliminating traffic fatalities on city roads by 2040. So thank you for your consideration and support. Any questions or comments, Councilmember Ryder?
And no one signed up to speak on this?
No.
Okay, all right. I think, are there people here from the community here? I know Kevin's here. Did anybody else join you? No? Okay. I know Kevin shared with me some comments, and I got emails from others that couldn't be here tonight. This project's been a really long time coming, going back to, I believe, 2012. And I just want to acknowledge, though many of the folks in the community weren't aware that this has finally made it to the next step on the agenda. They didn't have a lot of warning. Because this has been going on for a very long time, but the members of the community put a lot of effort and came to many meetings, and staff accommodated and held meetings to get a lot of public input back in 2021 and 2022. I believe there were about 3 public meetings back then to reignite this project after it got tabled somewhere around, Mr. Claybo, 2014 maybe or something is when it got tabled. This is not small to the folks who live out there because, as you can see from the agenda item, there are 56 pieces of property that will be in negotiations with and if we pass and approve the right-of-way consultant. The next steps will be to have a public meeting so that the people that own those parcels and affected community members get to meet who those consultants are. And anyway, there's just a lot of people that don't necessarily are able or make it to a council meeting tonight. I think I just wanted to acknowledge the time and efforts that they put into where this was redesigned and downscaled just a little bit to make less impact on those parcels, but also meets the needs of what we need, which is a turn lane out there. For anybody who's gone to New Harvest, it gets very difficult to turn in out there on some of those businesses as well as some of those homes. There's a development there. And so I look forward to working with all the property owners and all the community out there as they move forward and the right-of-way negotiations. I'm pretty sure by the time this project is done, the first time it got started, I was not even thinking about running for council. And I won't be here on council when this project is finished. But I do use that Target and New Harvest, so I will go out there and meet people on the Greenway out there, because that's the other thing. This is going to include bike lanes and Greenway. And in some of the public meetings, community members in the subdivision out there that actually are county residents came to talk about how excited they are that they'll be able to take a Greenway to the park there. So I look forward to many more public meetings as this process moves forward. We make sure that everybody knows what's going on over the next few years.
Thank you, Councilmember Ryder. Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, kudos.
Please put your microphone on.
Kudos to Mr. Murphy about all the work you've done on this. It was way before I was on council too, and I was on the planning commission, and I remember you calling those early meetings, if I'm not mistaken, under the gazebo out at New Harvest. And you've survived several heads of engineering, and you've surprised more than one head of an MPC, and you have continued to persevere with this. But it's been admirable, and I remember those early conversations that you have when you engage the city administration and the reasonableness and the analysis that went into how we've got a problem here, we've got many things to balance. The history of that area, you know, some of the people families had lived there, you know, for many years. But then the acknowledgement of the need to solve these traffic problems and all that. So the amount of perseverance and the time that you've put in has really been impressive. And, you know, I just want you to know that we really appreciate it. And it's kind of an example of the way the process should take place when community members approach the city to get things done. So, you know, it's been really a good thing, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. Could someone go over how the project has been scaled back and share that with us?
Yes, Mr. Claybaugh?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I'm Tom Claybo, Engineering Director. So the original typical section of the project was 4 lanes with a median divide or a turn lane. But the section, we had several meetings with folks from the Oak Grove neighborhood, and their desire was that that section be reduced. We looked at some traffic analysis and determined that we could go to a 3-lane section in that. So it's really from New Harvest Park up to Mill Road would be a 3-lane section. Outside of that, we pick up quite a bit of traffic volume from Mill Road, so it's back to a 5-lane section east of there.
And then I see multi-use pedestrian and bike paths. Can you help me understand that?
So the entire corridor has a 10-foot wide shared use path on the north side, so that would be the same side as like Target, the church, and then an 8-foot sidewalk on the south side of the roadway.
Okay. And so I don't know if I need to ask our neighborhood leader who we have here, but we do not have others from the neighborhood present tonight, and I'm hearing from Councilmember Ryder that some were surprised that this was coming to our agenda. Would you mind coming forward and helping us understand what conversations have looked like with the neighborhood and how the neighborhood is feeling about this plan now?
Kevin Murphy, 4508 Murphy Road. We had been checking and we hadn't seen anything on the website updated, and then we saw it on the agenda, so we're like, oh, something's happened. And the last public meeting was June of 2022, so we're 18 months. I do appreciate Councilwoman Ryder did a lot of quick checking and communicated very quickly with us to let us know what was going on, so we really appreciate that, Councilwoman Ryder. And then Tom Claybo also gave us a good email today. When I talked to the people, I've talked with Dan Anderson and Dr. Theodore Jameson and some of the others in the community. Really, Dr. Jameson today, one of the things she said is she's like, I just want to make sure that 3-lane segment is staying, put in, which it is. The design's not changing and everything. So I think people were like, it was the initial shock. Oh, something's happening, and then I think everybody is now okay. We're 24 hours later. We're a little better, and we know that at least that there is some movement, and there is, most importantly, we know there's a public meeting coming up that will introduce the next phase of right-of-way. So I think we're happy about that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That aligns with what I was hearing from neighbors when I met with them. I think it's been a couple of years now. Was that section of the roadway plan, and so I'm cautiously optimistic that this will be a plan that will please the community and as well as meet our needs for the increased traffic we're seeing in that area. So thank you all for your work on this.
Councilmember Ryder.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify one of my comments. Mr. Claybo, you're welcome to chime in if you want. I think some of the confusion from the community is the last meeting we had was June 22, and so the question was, what happened in 2023? Like, why did nothing happen for such a long time? So I'll let you answer that question.
So
it's been a long time.
This is another one of those federally funded projects. So every phase of the project goes through the Tennessee Department of Transportation. So after we had public meetings and received that input and revised the plans, there was a need to reevaluate our environmental document. So that's what's been going on since June of 22. We just last fall got approval of that document, and now we've been working with TDOT to get permission to move to the right-of-way phase. So we had committed early on that there would be a meeting to introduce the right-of-way phase, to introduce our consultant. We intend to honor that, and so once we receive notice to proceed from TDOT, that meeting will be scheduled.
Okay, and so this next phase, I think you say is 12 to 18 months?
It's probably 18 to 24 months.
Okay, and then about 2 years to build it?
Yes.
Okay, I hope we're through the right-of-way phase before I hit the door.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Ryder, and Mr. Claybo, thank you for all the many meetings you've participated in, and, it's just a multi-year project that always takes a lot longer than people expect. I wanted to let council know I've personally been to a couple meetings, including one with the members of the Oak Grove Baptist, church, and that's located right there to hear their concerns and do our best to adjust to those concerns like we have with all the other neighbors. So I'm really pleased at the input we got from the community. Thank you, Councilmember Ryder, for all your work on that. And I think it's a great project that's going to make things safer and help traffic move more smoothly, whether on foot or bike or car. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11D is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Johnson, Memirian, and Thompson Incorporated for an amount not to exceed $695,400 to provide right-of-way acquisition, relocation, appraisal review, and related services for the Washington Pike roadway project.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11E is a resolution authorizing the mayor to amend the contract with HBTH Incorporated DBA Biosolutions Tennessee for the 2022 Creek Cleanup Project, increasing the contract amount by $34,000 for a new contract total of $243,900 and extending the date of completion to July 1, 2024.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11F is a resolution authorizing the mayor to amend the contract with Design and Construction Services Incorporated for the Knoxville Urban Wilderness Gateway Park Phase 2 Baker Creek Pavilion Project, increasing the contract amount by $36,216.30 for a new contract total of $2,703,559.80 and extending the date of completion to February 29, 2024.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Councilmember Fugit.
Thank you, Mayor. This is just time to ask this question. I'm going to vote for this. But Mr. Claybo, can you help me understand, we often see amended contracts. For a while, it was because cost overruns, inflation really got this. Is this, are we seeing now more scope of work increase in contracts, or are we still dealing with inflationary pressures because these contracts were committed a while back?
So this particular contract, it's a unit cost contract, and particularly the biggest issue was we had poor soils when we were excavating for footings, and so that ended up having an additional cost to do that work. A lot of times what you'll see, especially like this, when you see the completion dates coming up, it's kind of cleaning up the loose ends of things. So we bid these, and it's really very effective for the city and the contractor in that it's a shared risk when we have these unit cost contracts. So we're paying for exactly what we encounter. We get prices for that up front, and so it helps us get better pricing, actually.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not picking on this contract. We have a lot of these from time to time, and we haven't talked about it for a while about what drives that. People just see us passing them willy-nilly, and we're not passing them willy-nilly. So I just appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fugit. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11G is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Cannon and Cannon Incorporated to provide staff augmentation services for the city's Transportation Engineering Division for an amount not to exceed $91,000.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11H is a resolution setting the in lieu of tax payments for the electric, gas, and fiber systems of the Knoxville Utilities Board for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023, and providing for the allocation and distribution of such payments to the affected taxing jurisdictions.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11I is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute any and all documents necessary to apply for and, if awarded, accept a grant from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to provide funding pursuant to the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program in the amount of $201,682, with a city match of 10%, which will be used to purchase fitness equipment needed for the Fire Suppression Division of the Knoxville Fire Department.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11J is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the Knox County Community Action Committee to provide funding for compensation of one full-time youth community engagement coordinator and 4 or 5 part-time positions for young adults with lived experience of homelessness to assist the continuum of care in planning process of the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program planning activities in the amount not to exceed $53,300.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Council members, I just want to say that this is a really positive step to address young people in our community who are experiencing homelessness. This past year, the city partnered with members of the Youth Action Board to help submit the application for a $1.8 million grant that will fund these positions through the federal Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program. As we know, young people can face challenges that aren't the same as adults experiencing homelessness. So these proposed positions are part of our efforts to build systems that will help end youth homelessness in Knoxville. And I want to thank Jasper McEwen and the other members of the Youth Action Board for all their leadership and effort on this. And we've been applying for this grant for several years in a row. And it wasn't until we really empowered the Youth Action Board to be an even more engaged part of that application that we were successful. So want to thank the members of that board for their contributions. And now we have some money to get the work done. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11K is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an amendment to Agreement C-20-0309 with Gulf South Security of Knoxville, LLC, DBA Signal Security, to provide security services at Morningside Park to increase the annual base contract amount by $3,081.60, with a not-to-exceed amount remaining $281,000 annually.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11L is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute any and all documents necessary to extend for 1 year the Victims of Crime Act grant from the State of Tennessee Office of Criminal Justice Programs for an additional amount of $150,546 with no required local match.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
12A is an ordinance to amend ordinance number O-107-2019, known and cited as the City of Knoxville Zoning Code, to remove a previously approved planned district designation, SC2 Shopping Center, for property located at 0 Clinton Highway, Radeau, Nedcove, applicant 5th District.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, I just wanted to bring our attention to this parcel here, just as kind of a connection to some of the discussions we've made. This is blighted commercial property on a corridor in my district. It's 9 acres, and over 4 of it is surface parking lot. So when we're talking about opportunity on corridors, this is an example of it right here. I appreciate the planning staff lifting or making this change in it, and I'm not sure what the developer will do with it, but it does open up the opportunity for some kind of mixed use. So I just wanted to highlight, this is the kind of property that's up and down the corridors that we have an opportunity to really do some better stuff on. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Parker?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add on to that. It's also to add on to what you're saying, not just these old commercial buildings, but this is where we get rid of those big parking lots, right? This is where we redevelop those big parking lots and create new, beautiful communities. So I'm very much in support of that.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
12E is an ordinance approving the request of Shad Companies LLC for an amendment to the Northwest City Sector Plan from general commercial to light industrial for property located at 2000 Shoppers Lane, 3rd District.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
12F is an ordinance approving the request of Shad Companies LLC for a one-year plan amendment from general commercial to light industrial for property located at 2000 Shoppers Lane, 3rd District.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
12G is an ordinance to change the base zoning classification for property located at 2000 Shoppers Lane from IMU District to IG District. Shad Companies LLC, applicant 3rd District.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
12H is an ordinance approving the request of Erica Elia Munoz for a one-year plan amendment from neighborhood commercial to low-density residential for a portion of property located at 2812 Merchant Drive, leaving any special purpose land use classifications unchanged, 5th District.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
12I is an ordinance approving the request of Randy Guinard for an amendment to the Northeast County Sector Plan from office to medium-density residential office, leaving any special purpose land use classifications unchanged for property located at 1717 Loves Creek Road, 4th District.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Councilmember Ryder.
Yeah.
Your microphone.
Gennard, maybe. I forgot to push the button. It is late. Mr. Gennard, give you a second with my fumbling to get there. I know that you spoke to members of the community, Mr. Collins and Mr. Murphy, about what your plans are there. And the primary concern for people in that area is the historic home and what the plans were. So I don't know if you want to comment about what your plans are for the property.
Randy Gennard, 5408 Fountain Gate Road, Knoxville. Our plans are to preserve the historic house there. Lindsay Crockett's been through the house, and we used her counsel on what we can do with it. We'd like to use it as a shared office space for tenants that we plan to have there. We want to do townhomes on that property, and then it'd be just a place that they could do shared office space.
And how many townhomes do you expect?
64.
Okay, on the property there?
Yes.
Okay. Have you considered doing, or have you talked with Ms. Crockett about putting the home on the National Register when you're done with the project?
I think it's to my knowledge, it's
on
already
there
on it.
already? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, it's already on the National
Yes.
Register? Okay. Have you considered doing an H1 or any kind of protection for it, like after the long haul when you're done?
We're open to anything that would help. It's
Okay.
not that we're wanting to close up anything and where we couldn't, where there wouldn't be a historic use for it.
Okay, and what's your time frame for when you would, when are you going to get started? What's going on?
As soon as we get enough cash.
Oh, okay.
Do I ask for that now?
Yeah, I don't know that I have any, but, okay. Is there anything specific about the townhouses? They're just regular market rates that you're building there? I know you've done some houses over on Greenback and some other areas.
Yes, we want to do what hadn't been done in this area, I don't think very much, is a pocket neighborhood of townhomes.
Okay.
So we're probably a year off by the time we ever get started.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, and I look forward to us talking to you more as the project moves along.
Thank you.
I'll let you go. I'm going to ask Mr. Murphy a question if you don't mind, because I know we talked to you about it, but Mr. Murphy, you own a similar historic home not too far away from this, and I had the question for you. Yours is on the National Register, correct, but doesn't have H1? Just curious what your plans are.
Correct. Kevin Murphy,
Tangential.
4508 Murphy Road.
Yeah.
The very wise Ann Bennett advised me when I started my journey a long time ago, if we had good designers and good architects, to go ahead, do the work, which then put on the National Register, and then put the historic overlay on it in that order. Basically, because if you do it any reverse way, first you document the current condition, then you have to justify all the changes and amend your National Register application. And if you have an H1, if you have a historic overlay on it on top, then you add an incredible amount of building permits. So if we have, so it can be, if you've got good people working on it, good architects and all that, it can help a lot to smooth it if you do that at the tail end of the project instead of ahead. So, which is what I'm doing.
And the goal that you achieve by putting the H1 on at the tail end?
That protects for future owners, which is good, because if we have, I hope myself is a good owner and Mr. Gennard's a good owner, but if you have good owners, you're good, but as soon as it passes hands, the H1 protects it in the future. In the county, at least, I don't think in the city, but in the county, you can actually, an H1 could extend outward as well, so that adjacent development might have to be at least complementary and compatible in terms of massing and some look and such.
You could do your entire farm too, couldn't you?
Yes.
So if there was ever subdivision or anything, it would impact anything else that was
Yes,
built
or the next Dollar
adjacent.
General, yes.
Oh, or the next door Dollar
Yes,
General.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
12J is an ordinance approving the request of Randy Grenard for a one-year plan amendment from low-density residential to medium-density residential office for property located at 1717 Loves Creek Road, leaving any special purpose land use classification unchanged, 4th District.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Council members, there's nobody who signed up for public forum, so without objection, this meeting is adjourned.